Hey, it's Toulouse and Cat, and this is Beyond What's Said, the show that explores the hidden dynamics behind communication, confidence, and how we connect with each other.
Today, we're going to be talking about conversation structures, where we explore the qualities of a good conversationalist. What makes a good conversation? All the ins and outs, the nuts and bolts of that.
So if you want to know more about the nuts and bolts of conversations, make sure you like and subscribe. Let's get started.
Let's do it. Okay, so what makes a good conversation? What do you think?
It feels effortless, immersive, lose track of time. There's this kind of natural back and forth, and you don't even need to worry about interjecting. Things just kind of happen spontaneously, organically.
Yeah.
That's the mark of a good conversation.
What about like a difficult conversation? You remember any particular conversation that was just like, oh, that felt a bit tiring or exhausting?
I can't remember a specific one off the top of my head recently, but I think when it feels like you're pulling teeth, you have to really prompt the person to expand upon a topic, or like you have to find whatever it is that, you know, you're going to talk about. And you also stay at this kind of surface level of the weather, kids, job. This is something along those lines. That's when it gets awkward, I think.
Yeah. No, like in the beginning of my time as a coach, I was learning to build rapport with clients on the floor or prospects on the floor. They're not clients yet. Trying to drum up conversation with strangers all the time, right? In hopes of making a sale or to sign them on as my clients. I remember I used to always talk about weather. That was like my go-to thing. So, how's the weather? Yeah. So, it's kind of cold today, huh? Oh, it's kind of hot today. Oh, you know. And it was just like this nonstop weather talk. Yeah. And then until I started noticing myself that that was what I did, I kind of felt really silly about it. But it's funny because I still kind of use that with like people that I'm not familiar with. That's just an easy thing to talk about. But no, you're right. Like in terms of difficult conversations, I think for me, it was also this kind of, I think I have two when I feel it's very difficult. So one would be when, like you said, you have to keep prompting the next line of dialogue. It's like you ask a question, they answer.
Yes.
And now you have to think of another question and things like that. And another one would be like they just wouldn't stop talking.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
the one-sided kind of conversation.
It's just like, so I feel like those are the more difficult ones that I felt. You walk away just feeling drained as opposed to feeling rejuvenated, which would be a good conversation where it feels effortless and you feel like you had fair play and they also had fair play as well.
Yeah, I feel like to me, an uncomfortable conversation, it feels like a grad school class. For those of you that have, never been in kind of a graduate level, PhD, master's level seminar, at least in history, the way it happened is, you're about a handful of people, like a dozen or so, and you're all discussing like 2 or 3 books that you had to read for the week. And everyone is making these like really brilliant, insightful points about the book we're talking about. And then you're actively trying to listen to the person, but also actively trying to construct your own rebuttal or contribution to this kind of high level academic style conversation. And I feel like a tough conversation is one that's kind of similar to that, where not on like an intellectual caliber, but more like as you're listening to the person, you're like paranoid about like, oh my God, like what am I going to say next? I have to come up with something that like weaves my input into their input. And then it just becomes this, this kind of back and forth where internally you're just crafting your next response and you're not really paying attention to the other person.
That actually touches on what we talked about in episode 7 with active listening. We talked about performance mode versus connection mode. Like, are you the whole time thinking about what you're going to say next, or are you actually listening and trying to contribute thoughtfully and things like that? So I talk about this in my workshop when I teach conversation structures. And I talk about intention, attention, and response types. And so what you talked about earlier is like, where is my attention? Am I trying to interject? We talk about performance mode, connection mode, and things like that. That all comes down to intention and attention. So what is the difference? They sound so similar. Intention is where you're coming from.
Yes.
So it's like, am I here to dominate the conversation? Am I here to make myself sound really smart or really sophisticated or whatever it is that your intention is? Or is my intention here to genuinely connect with the people around me, genuinely understand their side of the story, or try to discover and, excavate interesting things about this environment, this room, or the people in front of me, right? I feel like in your academic setting story, I think that a lot of the people who are there, their intention is probably like, okay, we're all here to discuss this book, so I need to sound rather smart.
Yes. Yes. And it's funny because there's a lot of things you're going to say about the performance mode, connection mode, down the road in this episode. But it's interesting. The intention of performing was definitely at the top of the list in that room. In that type of setting, that's what you want to do. You're sort of trying to gain favors with professors and you're trying to impress members of your cohort. But I felt like the most productive conversations that really got places were the more, I'm just intending to connect here. So outside the seminar room, and only a handful of people here that I can remember that I had these extended conversations well outside of the university or even just outside the classroom, where it was just pure for the love of the game. We were just like in, I would say it's in curiosity mode, right? We were just literally talking about a bunch of different things for the sake of talking about them, seeing interesting connections happen between topics we never really could dream of in the seminar room, because in the seminar room, it's performance mode. It's about like, let's show them how awesome I read this book and how I dominate this topic.
Well, that's the thing is that we're not saying that performance mode is bad and you should never do performance mode. No, but I think there's a time and place. So it depends on, is this a performance? If it is, please perform.
Exactly.
Show the best that you have. Show them how smart or how capable or how whatever it is that you are. But in a day-to-day conversation or just at, a discussion roundtable where there are no stakes of performance, but if you come in with the intention of dominating, performing, then it does create this kind of gap where people feel like they can't quite connect with you. But if you are to come in with that genuine curiosity to be like, hey, let's all bring in different perspectives and talk about things that you didn't even think that the conversation could go. And I do think that has something to do, in order to do that, I do think being well read, being well versed, having a repertoire, exactly, of things that you can talk about will allow you to enter in with the intention of curiosity and contribution, as opposed to just, this is what I prepared, this is what I am. Yes. Everything else is going to come back and loop back to me because that's the only thing I can talk about.
Yeah. No, and I think that this is a question I get from students often and parents of students, like, how can I make my child like more knowledgeable about things and just more well-rounded, or how can I just come into any conversation or any situation and know what to say spontaneously, right? Whether we're in connection or performance mode, I think like just reading as much as you humanly possibly can, within reason, read fiction and nonfiction. I prefer nonfiction. Read the news, read long form essays or magazine articles, right? One of the coolest and best pieces of advice I ever got was from a mentor at UCLA, Professor Benjamin Madley. He's just an amazing, scholar of Native American history. And in his class, we had this wonderful moment where he would say to the students, you want to write better, you want to read a lot, because a good athlete will fuel themselves with good food and good sleep and nutrition and hydration, right?
Yeah.
Much like a good writer will have all sorts of patterns and associations and ways of talking about things that they can kind of put on a page. And I think a good conversationalist requires that kind of training.
That's right.
Like I read the news, I scan the news every day, and I've been doing this for years and years and years. And sometimes, there's interest. I mean, history, my background and everything, but also there's inside of me, there's just like a desire that like at any given point, I can look at a region of the world and tell you, there's an election that just happened in Colombia, or there's, X or Y disaster that struck this nation, or this scientific discovery. Like I like to just have that living in my head because I know it's going to come in handy. irrespective of whether I'm trying to sound sophisticated in front of an audience, so performance mode, or just like trying to find common ground with a person I just met and they happen to be from a particular culture or a particular place, and I know something about that place.
And that is, very crucial to connection mode, particularly because when you're able to say something that is relating to them or relevant to the person in front of you, not only will they go, oh, first of all, you know this about me or about my culture or where I came from.
Yeah.
But it's also like, now I have something to talk to you about. So it's not just like the new person that just met you, now constantly has to find out more about you because that's the only thing that you know what to say.
Exactly.
It's like, yeah. And so it's so conducive towards both performance mode and how to sound smarter and also in connection mode in how to sound smarter, but without dominating the conversation. I always kind of remember this story that you told me about there was a professor who was on an airplane.
Yeah. She was seated next to a gentleman, and the gentleman was listening to her talk about her work and about her research and this and that. And at the end of the flight, the gentleman basically said, "Thanks, I learned so much about you." And then that was kind of the end of that exchange. And she felt, the professor felt mortified because like, oh my God, I just spent an entire flight. I don't know how long the flight was, but one can assume it was more than an hour, like just talking about herself and leaving no room for this other person to provide some kind of input.
That really resonated with me because I remember I've done that to other people, and I can definitely remember how other people have done that to me and how I just walked away going, first of all, feeling quite exhausted, but also like, wow, I learned so much about them. It's like, I remember when I did that to someone, right? I was like maybe 19 or 20 or something like that. I was young. I'd just broken up with my boyfriend, and my good friend wanted to, make me feel better, take me out. Let's go and celebrate, or let's just go in and eat some nice food and all that stuff. So I spent the entire time just telling the same breakup story, like 100 different angles. And I remember like, she was so patient with me. It was probably like a 3-hour outing or whatever. She just listened and listened. But by the end, her face was just like this. Just completely like done, right? And I remember that face so clearly because since then, I had tried to be more mindful about how I relay my story and know when to stop. And so I think like that really ties into that intention, right? And also this really ties into attention. It's like, is your attention on yourself and what you want to say? Or is your attention on the other person and being curious about the other person or giving the other person the stage as well?
Yeah. And I think it's really tough in the moment to not be in the mode of trying to create the conditions for connection, or like, okay, my attention is really on me. It's not on the other person. I think that almost reflexively, we're going to look for ways to talk about ourselves. And it's weird. I guess it's maybe we do it for egotistical or selfish reasons, but I think it's because there's a fundamental anxiety in any conversation. What if we run out of things to say? And so you just fall back on your own little inventory of stories or
not necessarily.
anecdotes.
I feel like we tend to talk about ourselves because we obviously know ourselves the most and we don't know enough about that other person. I do think that a lot of times it's not like we intend on overtaking the conversation or whatnot. It's like, it's our way of trying to create that common ground by showing, hey, I have a similar story too. And therefore I'll bring in, but accidentally dwell on my story for too long, which is what we're going to go into, talk about like response types. We'll talk about the different response type. So the 3 response types that I broke down in my workshop is dominant, dead end, and supportive. And so previously we had just kind of touched upon maybe like the first 2.
Dominant and dead end.
So I mean, let's look into it. So what is dominant response, right?
Sure.
It is exactly what you said that professor kind of described. It's this, I took over the entire conversation and the person walked away feeling, wow, I learned so much about you. But you had learned nothing about them kind of thing. Or like that whole taking over a conversation with the intention of relating but then just now it's my time. Like, let me grab the mic from you.
And I think that one is so sinister and subtle at the same time, because you really do think, I think in your heart of hearts, feel in the moment that like, I'm creating grounds for relatability. It's like, now you just insurgently weaved yourself back into the conversation.
Well, that's it. Or it's like, how many times have you been in a conversation where you start a conversation saying things like, oh man, my back really hurts from jujitsu.
Yeah.
And then the other person will just be like, oh, my back, let me tell you about the time when my back hurts from jujitsu. It was way worse than yours,
No, for sure.
It's like, competition to like who has it worse.
No, but you I think you've identified the most obvious version of that. And it's funny, it is injuries or maladies or any kind of diseases that the second we bring them up, more often than not, the other person is going to be like, well, let me tell you about the time I got hit by a truck, or like, or something like that.
Or it's like, how many like meme reels we've seen of like Asian parents trying to tell their kids how like they've never had it hard enough.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you mean you like...
it's like I walked to school. I had to like crawl to school and
crawl
no shoes.
Fight like 2 lions along the way.
Yeah. And I feel like maybe there's a part of us that's like, oh, but like you're talking about blood and guts, let me give you more blood and guts. And then we inadvertently sound like we're just trying to one up each other.
It's true. And it's like, it's not just like a peer-to-peer kind of situation. It's like we just talked about, parent to child. We tend to, as parents, perhaps like we're so used to always be the one to give advice and guidance that we don't realize how often we just take over the conversation when really they just came to share something.
Yeah. And I think that it's interesting that the shifts in parenting, right? Starting out having to prevent your children from constantly inflicting harm on themselves, right? They're literally 2, 3, 4, whatever years old, and they're trying to run onto the street. They're trying to put their fingers in the electrical sockets. I feel like our kids haven't really done that all that much, but but like, the amount of times that like so much of our parenting in the early stages was about shielding them from any kind of danger, physical or whatever. And lately, our girls, one is 9, one is 6, we start realizing kind of foolishly almost that, oh, wait a minute, they have subjectivity and they have these interior thoughts and moods. And now we actually have to talk to them. No, I'm kidding. But we actually have to like, oh, okay, so what is actually going on here? Let's have a conversation to unpack the layers of...
But it's funny because you were talking about, you're probably a little bit better with like, let's unpack this, right? But I remember Scarlett, when it came to me, it was just like, oh, we're learning like multiplication. We learned it this way, where you have to draw it out and all that stuff. And I'm just like, because part of my childhood grew up in Taiwan, where I just went to public schools. And our way of learning math, especially when it comes to multiplication table, it's rote memorization. You just literally memorize the entire thing. And then we even created a game to help us,
It's mind-boggling.
To help us remember that. And so I'm just like, what do you mean you have to use pen and paper? You just use your head. And she's like, no, you do this and then you add it up. I'm like, add? What do you mean add? And I start taking over the conversation. I'm like, no, let me show you. You just do this and that. Boom. There it is. And then she's just kind of looking at me going, so anyway, she completely ignored me after patiently listening to my explanation.
It's also like children developmentally, the way they express their thoughts, their moods, it's sort of meandering, circuitous. If you think like adults have a tough time getting to the point, for children, they're operating at a bigger deficit here. So it's like with children, at least with our own children, it's that patience, right? That patience to not take over, finish their sentences for them. Right. So I think the dominant response type, we see it in social situations and friendships. I'm sure there'd be no shortage of like workplace examples.
Oh, of course. I think the classic, you're at the lunch table and you're sitting there, you're like, man, I really hope that I just get some time to rest. And then someone comes over and they just start taking over. And you're like, I guess I'm not eating now.
No, that's
Go on.
And I think that sometimes like our fellow human beings, they recharge by way of taking up a lot of room, a lot of oxygen with their stories and everything like that. I think it's a very normal thing, right? We crave connection, and sometimes we think that that's connection.
Yeah.
Like we're making an effort to sit down and talk to a person, but no, little do you know,
that the other person is
Yeah.
actually trying to recharge by not talking.
Yeah.
No, but I think you made a really good point, is that it's not like these people are bad.
No.
You know, it's their way of communication.
Yeah.
But it's just sometimes without awareness, it can seem like you're stepping on each other's toes,
Yeah.
and it becomes really difficult or uncomfortable.
No, 100%,
I think that's a really important distinction, because it's like you can't just then see this person who's really chatty as like, oh, I need to avoid this person at all costs, because they're the dominant type. You know, when we say dominant response, it's not inherently like you should never take over a conversation.
Yeah.
Perhaps some people, like myself, when I'm eating, I don't like to talk. And so in order for the whole thing to not be this stretch of silence, I prefer someone who's a dominant talker to talk while I eat. I've literally said that to you before. I'm like, talk so I can eat. And then once I'm done, I will talk.
And it's funny, actually, over time, we've kind of absorbed each other's traits. I think that's always the mark of a good, healthy relationship, that you sort of become the person you're with and vice versa. But I have become more of a, I'm just going to eat and you're going to talk. Like, actually, when I am at the lunch table and people are talking up a storm in front of me, I actually kind of appreciate that now, because it's like, I'm just going to eat my food and
listen,
agreeably nod. No, I'm kidding. Like, just listen. Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
no, absolutely.
So dead end responses.
Yeah. Dead end responses is what you talked about in the beginning of the episode, where you say when you have to keep providing the prompts just to get the conversation to keep going.
Yeah.
You know, so
those
that
are way
one,
harder.
it's like I can definitely think of multiple times where it's just like, okay, so then what do you think about this?
Yeah.
It's kind of like almost like it feels like an interview.
Yes. Oh God. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. And it's like, all right, we're going to talk about the weather. Okay. Let's talk about floods, disasters. We're talking, you're trying to add all sorts of excitement to an already pretty standard, area of conversation. And it's just not like silence and monotony. And
well, it's kind of like how when we talk to students or when we talk to kids, it's like, so how was school? Good. What did you learn? Math. What about math specifically? We added stuff. Okay, and did you enjoy it? Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. That's exhausting. And I'm sure there's asking the kid or the teenager in question, like, can you name a specific thing, or starting with specifics rather than just kind of asking these more vague or general questions. That could be one solution to dealing with the problem of name one interesting thing that you learned in science class today, is probably a more strategic opener than what did
that's
you do?
The thing, is that some of the communication books, they would talk about how you don't want to give them a yes/no question.
Yeah, okay.
Because when you give them a question that generates either a yes or no, or like a one-word answer, then more likely than not, that's what you're going to get.
Yeah.
Especially if you're dealing with someone who's not necessarily in the mood to talk, or
very engaged with the subject matter,
or is just not comfortable with elaborating, or they're still learning how to be a good conversationalist, so you want to scaffold that with questions that are a little bit more open-ended but not too abstract, especially when it comes to teenagers or kids, right? They don't quite understand. It's like, what's the meaning of life? Huh? But it really is, again, awareness of who you're talking to. In dominant response, we talked about being aware of who is this person that I'm talking to. Are they more someone who enjoys a lot of conversation or not? Much like in the dead end response, it's like, okay, who am I talking to right now?
Yeah.
Is this someone who, if I throw a question, they're going to come up with all sorts of things?
Gotcha.
Or are they just going to kind of take the ball and keep the ball?
Yes. Or no, the ball's on the other side of the fence,
and they're just going to look at it.
They're not going to retrieve it. They're like,
they turn back and look at you.
Yeah,
exactly. No, so I think that's one way to try to extend that conversation, is to throw in more open-ended questions, but concrete questions.
Gotcha.
But also engaging topics. So if this is a teenager that you're talking to, and they clearly are not into astronomy, but you're super into astronomy. Even if you throw in open-ended questions about astronomy, they're still going to be like, I really don't care about this.
Yeah.
I'll tell you about a time where I had a friend who was really into basketball.
Okay.
Really, really, really into basketball. And okay, full disclosure, I was also interested in him. But it was more like a fling or whatever, right? It's like a little crush. And so he's really into basketball. I'm pretending to be really into basketball. But over time, when that feeling kind of subsided a little bit, I'm no longer as interested. His basketball talk just became so like drilled through my head already kind of thing.
Exactly.
And so then, but he never really took the time to be aware of what am I interested in. And so he just keeps talking because I keep responding.
Okay, gotcha. So that you gave him a false sense of like, oh, well, this person's actually interested in basketball.
Yeah, and then so eventually I just did the whole the Homer Simpson meme where you just
kind of
like back into the bushes.
Into the foliage. Exactly.
So it's like you have to be aware of A, who you're talking to, and B, like, what are they interested in? If they're not interested in basketball or astronomy in our previous example, then what's something that they might be interested in? Like, going back to the teenager thing, what are they interested in? If your purpose, your objective is to have a conversation, regardless of what it is, you just want to connect with your teenager. Then talk about things that they're interested in. Get them engaged.
And I think, teenagers are a group of middling sized human beings who are in the midst of like finding their groove in terms of autonomy, independence. As a matter of fact, they're breaking away from the parental control here. That's the whole basic objective of being a teenager, is to assert yourself both on an identity level, on an interest level, on like who your friends are, your tribe, right? And obviously, so as a parent, it's probably a lot harder to kind of have a deep, super engaged conversation with a teenager because they are trying to, back away. But a lot of the books that I've read about how to deal with teenagers on an emotional or on a social level, it often comes down to like what you said. It's find ways to connect with them based around interests or meaningful topics that they might have. Like, don't assume that they're going to want to talk about these things, whether it's astronomy or an academic subject or something that full well is you kind of imposing your own like interests or kind of injecting your own interest into the conversation.
There is a specific situation where this would be very useful to deploy the dead end response type. Is going back to, my crush, when he started annoying me. I no longer have feelings for this person, so I started being annoyed at this person. When they keep talking, I'll just give them dead end response.
Okay.
Yep. After a while, hopefully they get the idea and they stop talking.
That's interesting.
So the dead end response, while annoying if you're the person that's giving the ball, but it's also a useful tactic for when you want someone who's really chatty talking about things that you don't want to talk anymore, or you're like, I really got to go, and this person's not getting that sense of time. Start using the dead end response.
So it's almost like what you're saying is the first and the second type of conversation type. So dominant, you can, like, if you just want to sit there and listen to a person while you carry out some work, eat a plate of food, dominant can actually serve your interests. And it could actually probably serve your interests as well if you're in one of these like performance modes, having to kind of put yourself out there.
Having to talk a lot.
Gotcha.
Or if you were someone who prefers that you talk a lot and they are genuinely interested in what you're saying, dominate away.
Dominate away.
Don't feel like you need to throw the ball back if they're like, no, I don't want the ball right now. You know what I mean? So it is a lot of awareness.
Okay.
And then dead end is good for, first of all, being aware. Is like, am I doing that to the person that's talking to me? Are they passing me the ball and I'm just keeping it or just letting it drop? So being aware of that. And when you find that you are, what should you do to get out of that? Well, you can ask questions back. Ask questions back.
Open-ended questions.
Or make a pivot and relate it to a different story or a different topic or whatever. Or you can use the dead end response as a tactic to end the conversation. in a polite way.
Okay, gotcha. So that's interesting. So there's strategy and usefulness in both approaches.
Yeah.
So when it comes to improving communication or improving any kind of behavior, there's often like the style where like the first couple of options are bad, but the last one is the good one.
Well,
so
it is still the good one. The supportive response is
yeah.
obviously the most desired kind of, because that essentially, when there's a supportive response, you are deploying awareness. You are deploying awareness of whether the ball is being passed back, if there's fairness in like, oh, I've had the ball for a while now, I'm going to pass it back.
Okay,
And then
gotcha.
the other person also has that awareness to pass it back to you. And then you also have awareness of, who is this person that I'm playing with? What are they interested in? Do we have common ground that we can continue this on? And so supportive response is essentially, if someone, if you were to come and talk to me, I would not just deflect and go, oh, I don't want you to know anything about me. I'll share a little bit about myself, and then I will ask a question back. So pass that ball back to you. So you have a chance to share and play and all that stuff. And then you would hopefully bring it back to me.
So it's kind of like you're in sporting metaphors, because you seem so fond of basketball. Sporting metaphors, you're talking about a kind of an assist, right? A series of passes that lead to the goal.
Well, that's it. A game is not fun to watch if there's only one MVP who's literally doing the entire work of the team, and all you're seeing is this person doing everyone's work.
Gotcha.
While that person may feel like a champion or like they're the hardest, and they are, but from the audience perspective and from the teammates' perspective, or even from the coach's perspective, they'd be like, this is a bit goofy, kind of thing. So the best games to watch is the one where everyone's kind of, maybe there's one MVP, but then everyone's also equally contributing, and everyone gets a, not like gets a turn. That sounds like everyone gets a turn. No, but you get what I mean.
Yeah. It's almost, and again, like how many minutes into the conversation, how many sentences into the dialogue. I feel like, don't make it mechanical. It's more like you're, just know that after a little bit of time, and it's more a feeling, like a spontaneous kind of organic feeling based on the situation, you'll know when it's time to pass it back to the other person.
And it does come with practice, I think. And if, like, say you're someone who's used to being a dominant response type, and you're practicing to be more aware so that you can become a better conversationalist, it might feel very awkward, like, oh, I'm abruptly stopping myself and just so that I can pass the ball back. But I think with that practice, you will become more attuned to this kind of vibe, or this feeling of, oh, okay, I'll just pass it back now. And if you're someone who's used to dead end responses, you're used to not carrying anything, it might be very like, oh, okay, now I have to think about something to say. But again, with practice, it will start flowing.
And I think that active listening matters here, because the number of times where I found myself talking to someone and I'm a little bit anxious about keeping the conversation flowing, but then like I can recall some detail about a story about that person's life or something they mentioned. And then as we get to a little bit of dead air moment, I'll be like, oh, hey, you had mentioned that you would travel to X country, or that you worked in X place, or that, you competed in X sport, and then elaborate on that. And then that creates its own weird twists and turns in the conversation.
That is such a crucial thing to connection, because that's when you're now moving beyond just a surface level conversation, and you're creating a deeper connection with them by relating to an information that perhaps you picked up from earlier when they first started talking, or from a separate encounter when you talked with them, and they will feel that, oh, you actually heard what I said. You actually remembered this detail about me, and now they feel connected to you, and they'll actually open up and share more, and that will actually make the conversation smoother and smoother, and the connection stronger and stronger.
It shows, and also the person feels heard. It feels like, oh, hey, you actually picked up on this detail or this little anecdote of mine. So it showed some genuine connection is being made. I think people respond to that really positively.
Yeah, and that is the connection mode, because we talked about connection mode is entering with curiosity about the person in front of you. And you've demonstrated that to them by recalling an information that they had said earlier.
Yeah.
So they feel seen and they felt heard.
Yeah.
And, you know, we always say, like, you know, you hear this all the time. People don't remember what you say, but they remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
And so when you can make them feel seen and heard and valued, then all of a sudden the conversation will naturally become very,
And
you know.
I think talked about curiosity and showing active listening. And yeah, even in performance mode, if you're in the middle of a job interview, asking questions that show you are actively sort of paying attention to some of the setups of their questions, or when they were talking about the role, talking about the place that you're trying to get into, right? I feel like a lot of interviewers, employers will value that, because it's actually, that's one of the harder parts about interviews, like the do you have any questions for us? That part could become so generic and can fall really flat. But if you actually made an effort to A, do a little bit of research about the place, B, actively listen to the people on the panel, and then sort of maybe circle back to something that was mentioned and weave your question, connect your question to that. I think that's a power move. That's pretty.
You know, that reminds me of that interview that we did, actually, you know. But before I go on to that, before I share that story, I think, like, you just touched upon something that, you know, performance mode and connection mode, while we said that they're two separate things, I think the advanced move is to combine the two.
Yeah.
So as someone who is able in the performance mode setting, such as an interview or a performance or a presentation, where you do have to engage with the audience or the person in front of you, you're in performance mode, you're showing how great or how capable or how smart you are. But at the same time, you're able to switch on that connection mode and loop them in, involve them in. That's like, you know, advanced maneuver right there. And so that's what separates someone who is doing their performance scripted versus someone who is magnetic and charismatic.
Exactly.
I think that's like the ultimate difference. And so going back to that interview experience. So I remember, you know, when I interview, this is something that I actively do, is that I look at the person who is interviewing me. Where are they from? I look at where they're from and I kind of chameleon myself, not in like a fake way, but because, you know, I've been well traveled. I've lived in Australia, lived in America, lived in Taiwan, Japan, Cambodia, and I've interacted with people from very different cultures. And so having that awareness is kind of like my little toolkit. So I look at the person, like, we're on Zoom, it opens up, is an Australian guy, and then followed by, you know, a few other people from various nationalities, some British, some Australian, some American, things like that. But the main guy, he was Australian. And so I just went, oh, great. I can draw from my Australianism, a little bit of my Australianism. And immediately you started seeing, like, their face went from this to, they start opening up. Because I start using a little bit more of that twang, like Australian twang. And I'm like, oh yeah, whereabouts in Australia are you from? Oh yeah, you know, I'm from here. And, you know, we talk about this and that. I start bonding over that. By the end, the main guy went from literally just serious face, just here to do his job, to we're chit-chatting, we're laughing and all that stuff. And then he came on. The first thing that the main guy said to him was, I don't even know what to call you. Should I call you mate?
Yeah, it was. And then my immediate reaction was like, oh my God, what did she do? But like in sort of in like, what kind of magic did she work on these people? But I think it's like such basic advice, but it's really powerful advice. Find a way to relate to the person's home, culture, language. I feel like the biggest and most important contributing factor to my ability to navigate different conversations or just navigate different types of situations like this is having been exposed to a broad range of people. Like, I remember the weird, almost split mind effect that this had on me when I was living in LA. It's like I spent half my time at UCLA surrounded by, you know, high-powered PhD students and professors, and the other half of the time I was in CrossFit gyms or weightlifting rooms, just talking to people, professionals, blue collar, working class, all the way to like lawyers, doctors, right? Getting exposed to the broadest range of peoples and professions, and, you know, people with different skills, different jobs, different experiences. And then also, like, you know, obviously living in Taiwan for so long, being in Japan for a number of times for research, and now China. It's like just being able to have conversations in a language that isn't originally mine,
Yeah.
immersing yourself in that, it makes you just capable of flexibly navigating all of these different situations, being able to bring up other people's culture or bring up other people's life experiences
Yeah.
as a jump off point for, having a good conversation.
And that's kind of what, makes you stand out is
Mm,
that it will make them remember you, be like, oh, this person is so interesting. They were able to relate to my culture and her
yeah,
culture and his culture,
yeah,
as well as talk about this current affair and that current affair. So
yeah,
it goes back to what we said about having an arsenal or repertoire of different things that you can talk about. So
absolutely.
my repertoire a lot of times is that cultural nuance or
Yeah,
that cultural intelligence. And so I like to use that strategically to build that connection while in performance mode. And that
yeah,
has a lot of times gotten me to really good places or really
yeah.
good optimal results. It doesn't guarantee that you will
No,
always get what you want,
yeah,
but it will definitely increase that chance. And
for
so
sure.
all these little communication toolkits that we share is not to guarantee that you will then succeed in every
Hmm.
single thing. No, but it will greatly increase your chance.
Yeah,
And if anything, it's just going to make you a better person to connect with the world around you.
yeah. And I think, you talked about cultural intelligence. And then earlier, I was talking about just being a well read person and getting in as much uh, good quality reading into your diet. All of that, is super important because it just maximizes the chances of you making a connection. It's not about success and whether or not like the biggest door you've ever needed in your career is going to open, but it's more
Mm,
like the conditions of possibility for you having great conversations, which lead to interesting
that's right.
opportunities. You're maximizing them by showing the world that, hey, I have a lot of interesting life experiences. I know a lot of things. I can connect to cultures, however distant, however close to mine. I'm curious. So I think
Yeah.
curiosity is like ultimately the thing that I think would trump everything, because even in performance mode, you show curiosity, you can make a connection. Even in the dead end type of conversation, with enough curiosity, you might get the other person to open up.
Well, yeah, no, absolutely. I think you hit upon a really good point is that conversations oftentimes are the key to opening doors.
Yeah,
It's not so much like you prepare, you apply, and that's your door opening.
yeah,
No, a lot of times it's the conversation and the connection you have made. A
yeah,
lot of the places that I never dreamt that I would have been able to
yeah,
go to were all just from the conversation I had with this person or with that person, the
yeah,
connections that I made. And then in turn they went, "Hey, do you want to come and do this with me?
yeah,
Or to come and do this for me?"
yeah,
And I'd be like, sure, why not? So that's such an imperative skill to have is to become a
yeah,
good conversationalist, to be able to maybe work on your performance mode, work on your connection mode, but eventually combine the
yeah,
two and really
absolutely.
practice towards that advanced maneuver
Yeah,
to open up more opportunities you never could have dreamt of. And so, yeah, that's kind of what we have for today
yeah,
is,
awesome.
conversation structure. To sum it up, we have intention, which is where you're coming from, and your attention, where are you focusing on during the conversation? And then also the three response types, which is the dominant kind where you take over or the person takes over the conversation, the dead end type where you just keep dropping the ball or passively waiting for the other person to give you more balls and then give you or the third type which is the supportive responses, which is the best kind, where it's, everyone gets fair play. You're aware of how long you've had the ball, you pass it over, and hopefully they also have the same awareness. And a couple more tips is having an arsenal or a repertoire of different information or knowledge about different places, whether it's through books, being well read, or through just, traveling.
Traveling, moving around different
Yeah, or
places.
just talking to people on the street,
Yeah,
talking to people of different backgrounds.
yeah,
So those are all things that you can put into your arsenal to use when you need to have the next conversation.
exactly. Yeah,
And so, yeah. All right.
I
That's
think
all
that's
for
it.
today. Have a good one. See you in the next one. Bye.